Hey, this is Stephen Murphy, the cinematographer of Hard Eyes, and you're listening to the Cinematography Podcast.
The following podcast contains explicit language. You're listening to the Cinematography Podcast presented by Hot Rod Cameras, a program about the art, craft, and philosophy of the moving image and the people who make it happen. Coming to you from the world headquarters of Hot Rod Cameras in Hollywood, California, are your hosts, Ben Rock and Ilya Friedman.
Hey there, Ben Rock.
Hey, Ilya Friedman, what's up? Sorry, I was looking at my computer there.
You know, it's as you do. You look at computers. It's kind of part of it.
Yeah.
Anyway, Ben, it's time for another fine episode of the Cinematography Podcast. Who is on our show today?
Now that we're out of the Oscar prestige miasma, I'm happy to say that we have Stephen Murphy, the DP of Heart Eyes, a very interesting merging of the rom-com genre and the slasher film genre. I have described it as Chuck Lorre remade My Bloody Valentine.
All right. And this is why you did the interview. Our producer, Alana Cody, loves to give you all the horror stuff because, frankly, you know, as much as I enjoy a good horror movie, I don't enjoy them the way that you enjoy a good horror movie. So I know that this is right up your alley. So
well, yeah, like she reached out and she was like, would you be interested in talking to Stephen Murphy, DP of Hard Eyes? I'm like, I have already seen Hard Eyes.
Yeah, I am sure you have. So, okay, we'll get to that interview in just a few minutes. But first up is our close focus.
And now, close focus.
This is sort of something topical, something that is going on in the industry. What do you think is the most preeminent story that we should talk about right now?
Well, I actually thought about talking about it last week, but we kind of had the Oscars wrap up. And this was something that was actually brought to my attention by Kay Zalatrakshy, our composer. But he's also a visual effects artist and a filmmaker of basically everything that goes into filmmaking. He does it. I don't think I've ever seen Kay's do costuming.
He probably could, though.
Or makeup. But yeah. Yeah.
He's got a real sense of style. He is Italian. He's got a, that Euro flair going on.
Anyway, but it's actually kind of a sad story because it is the kind of imminent collapse of Technicolor, the industry stalwart, the creator of the 3-strip Technicolor process. And he messaged me about it. And I'm like, yeah, I wasn't, in my mind, and this will show you how ignorant I am. And I'll just kind of leave it out there. Like, I thought of Technicolor as a lab primarily at this point, and I knew that they had some technology stuff, but unbeknownst to me, they have been spending a lot of money gobbling up visual effects companies like probably most notably MPC, but several others.
Also the Mill. The Mill's a big one.
Yeah. The Mill's huge. MPC is humongous, and they've been around forever. They recently did like the upcoming Snow White movie. They did that. MPC did stuff for The Revenant. They've done huge stuff, and I feel like this has like major overtones of rhythm and hues.
The visual Pi.
Visual effects company, won the Oscar for Life of Pi and went bankrupt the same week. And our friend of the show, Scott Liebrecht, who's been on the show, he made a documentary that you can find on YouTube called Life After Pi that kind of goes through that. And I feel like this is kind of that all over again. Technicolor, I hate it when something that's like an industry standard. Like Technicolor made The Wizard of Oz possible, though they have been around for over 100 years. And, they're a well-known, well-respected company. And I guess one of the things they're saying is like, they are just having a hard time finding new people to keep investing in what they're doing. And they might be, unless some angel swoops out or someone comes in and buys them out, they might be the next major casualty of this industry. And with them go down these visual effects companies with probably thousands of artists, and technicians and whatnot. And it's kind of I think this is horrible.
It's It's a big casualty, and it's not the only one. It's just the biggest one to make headlines right now, and is getting covered in the trades. Local, I shouldn't say local, but like, relatively good sized rental house industry camera in Burbank. I just found out day before yesterday that all of their stuff is going up to auction. They're out of business. So they had done tons of stuff too that wasn't sort of like traditional features. They'd done like live concerts and things like that. So
what is the reason for them going down? I mean, live concerts, if anything, are becoming a bigger deal.
I think that really what has happened, and I talked to actually an executive in the technical side of the industry just the other day, and they basically laid it at the foot of the studios. Essentially, the studios set the mood and the temperature for the entire industry. And if people are working and if people are busy and there's local projects that are going on, everyone feels comfortable spending money. When the studios are not doing that, they control such a massive amount of the dollars. Like when the fires hit, there were 7 studio projects that were either canceled, pushed, or left the state. And that was estimated at $1 billion right there of economic impact for Los Angeles. So yeah,
I hadn't really thought about that. I guess like I'm still thinking, COVID, then plus strikes. Like that was kind of a double punch to the gut of the industry. But the fires, like I guess in my mind, the fires were going to hit the pause button on things, but they would keep going.
Well, the money came out of the local economy. And then there was also something else I heard, which was besides the fires, studios in particular haven't been quick to try to bring production back to California, specifically Los Angeles, since the strikes and the threatened strikes. It's not all just, hey, we're all big one happy industry again. There's a certain amount of punishment that's happening, because it's only going to be a couple of years before negotiations happen again for these contracts. And the studios really want SAG. They really want the Writers Guild and IATSE to be thinking about how painful the strike was, and to have that firmly in their minds when it comes time for renegotiation. So strike is not really on the table, so that they are beaten down and not want to actually really advocate for themselves. So,
nobody wants a strike, but I also feel like, the argument that the cost driver on TV and movies was the cast and the writers is idiotic to me. It's like the expensive
and
cast,
IATSE, which IATSE, just there was a threat of a strike, but not actually a strike. I mean, all of these things. Look, studios are spending billions of dollars right now building new production hubs in Vegas and New Jersey. So it's like there's a lot of construction going on, huge money being spent to build these places. And I think a way to insulate themselves from the potential strikes in Los Angeles, if they happen again, that they can move without missing a beat, that there is no impact. In fact, they'll probably be able to make stuff cheaper, is I think what the thought process is. So yes,
without union writers and without union actors. I mean, come on, the
way it works. I mean, look, waivers, the idea behind the studios has always been to divide and conquer. It's like they buy up the scripts, they buy up the stuff that they need to ahead of time. They have a backlog, so they're always prepared. Usually the actors are not going to be overlapping with the writers. It just so happens that is how it ended up this year. But yet if they can get their specific things going, their specific waivers needed, then they're not going to feel any real economic impact. I think it's particularly telling that in many other countries, there's public money, there's government money that goes into movies. But of course, the accounting is totally different too. So that, like Screen Australia is a perfect example. They are sometimes for budgets over $500,000, they participate as an investor. The only way they get to participate as an investor is they have good accounting, so they understand exactly how much money is coming back. You do not see US government or NEA and Hollywood co-productions because the accounting would never fly. They're never going to actually reveal that sort of information. So it's like, even if there was public money, like Hollywood doesn't want public money. Hollywood wants to be able to keep everything opaque, and they want to do what they want to do, and they don't really want anyone getting involved. I think what really actually would start to change things in a real way is if there was more of a public interest and there was more transparency. But things kind of work the way that they do, and Hollywood can get away with going anywhere in the world to produce, and they don't face tariffs on what they've done when they try to bring it back into the country. They're American corporations, so at least most of them. Anyway, it's a like, I'll get off my soapbox here, but there is a there's an awful lot at stake dollars wise, and the studios can't afford. The studios aren't going under. The studios can afford to not be producing things, which is kind of scary because nobody else can really do that.
Yeah, well, so let's circle this back to the Technicolor situation, because I feel like the Technicolor situation is a casualty of the same thing that wrecked Rhythm and Hughes and has wrecked other visual effects companies, which is that in the visual effects world has been kind of a race to the top quality wise and a race to the bottom budget wise. So it's like a normal thing that a VFX company will bid out a job and then the job will increase and the money will not go up. And I don't know if that's exactly what's train wrecking Technicolor here. I don't know. What do you think is train wrecking Technicolor?
Well, you got to understand, this is really recent. It was only February 21st when Technicolor started telling customers and employees that there were severe financial challenges. I mean,
at the beginning of February, they were saying they were in the black. At the beginning of February, they were saying that they were in good shape.
So really, I think that something changed. I don't think it was, something changed, and I have a feeling it was like they probably looked at the slate of films, the slate of stuff that was supposed to happen in front of them, the amount of money that was supposed to be coming in, and it wasn't. And they also said they were seeking new investors to be able to do this, and investors weren't turning out of the woodwork. And let me tell you, Hollywood's not so attractive a place for investors at the moment. It's like the industry has been in severe decline for like the last 2 years as far as like new work and production. Now, granted, still ticket sales are up. There's still more stuff being made, but it doesn't look healthy. It doesn't look robust. All of these reports about how streaming services losing money is not exactly super attractive to Wall Street. We'll see what happens, but I have a feeling that when the punishment is lifted and then everything is sort of like, hunky dory and back to normal, it's going to be a different world. But at the moment, Technicolor might be the first big casualty of other vendors and suppliers to the industry, which are trying to figure it out right now.
Do you think Technicolor completely goes away, or do you think somebody buys them, or they just, become, I don't know. What happens to Technicolor?
It's really hard to say. I think that pieces of it might live on. I think they've got valuable assets. Maybe someone else buys parts of it. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see.
So, and this is maybe a very old school question, but like, who are the extant film labs? Photochem and who else? Or is it just Photochem at this point?
It's just Photochem. Every bit of film for a professional Hollywood production is processed at Photochem now. So it's been that way for years. Technicolor hasn't done it for a while. Deluxe gave it up years ago. So it's all Photochem. Every frame of film basically goes to Photochem, at least in Los Angeles.
Yeah. I wonder if, about other labs around the world or whatever. I mean, I'm sure in the world there are other labs, like, in New York there was always DuArt and
absolutely. Yeah, there are other labs in the world, but at least Los Angeles, Hollywood, it's Photochem. That's who does it.
Who would have thought they were going to be the last one standing? I would have bet money on Technicolor, honestly. I mean, Photochem's awesome. I'm not saying anything negative about Photochem. They're great, but
I mean, it's hard to say. There was once upon a time when there was a lot of labs.
Well, this is me hoping that Technicolor, somebody comes in and saves Technicolor. I think that, I love living in a world where Technicolor is still going strong, and also where all these visual effects artists can actually work. I mean, it's a weird splintered world for VFX right now.
Yeah, I don't think that you can blame AI. Undoubtedly, some pundit out there will probably blame AI, but that's not really what's going on right now.
Oh God, no! I don't. I think it's too early to blame AI for this.
No, there's plenty of other issues and things to go around, but I definitely feel like the slowdown of Hollywood in particular, and Technicolor not being able to leapfrog enough projects, sort of in their pipeline to be getting money coming in and to be able to keep the ball rolling, probably was a massive impact to their bottom line.
Oof. Well, I don't mean to make it too much of a bummer. Let's go ahead and get to our interview, which is awesome, with Stephen Murphy.
The Cinematography Podcast Interview.
Thank you so much for coming on. It's exciting to meet you. And Heart Eyes. Let's start by talking about Heart Eyes. When I've talked to my friends about Heart Eyes, I describe it as Chuck Lorre did a remake of My Bloody Valentine. What were your? It's okay. So I'm someone who's done a lot of horror comedy stuff myself, and I love the genre. This is, I think, the first time I've ever seen horror rom-com. Like, not romance in a horror movie or a romance with horror overtones, but it is a straight-up rom-com. And tonally, that seems like a minefield to me. How did you approach it? And before you even get into it, it's like, to me, it's like the things that make a rom-com are sweet and pretty and happy. And the things that make basically a slasher movie, which is what this is, are exciting kill scenes. And this has both. How did you do it?
With great ease. It was tricky. It was tricky. It was the very first conversation I had with Josh, the director, when I met him for the first time. And I'm pretty sure that tone conversation was the first conversation he had with everybody when he was picking all his HODs and when he was pitching to the studio, because it is a very fine balance. But from a visual perspective, essentially, Josh was very clear from the beginning that he wanted to make a very earnest love letter to rom-coms and to slasher movies, particularly rom-coms and slasher movies from the 90s, from the 80s and 90s. Mm. He didn't want us to shortchange either one. He didn't want it to be, it's a horror movie, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, there's a bit of romance in it. He wanted to make a genuine rom-com and a genuine slasher movie, but in the same film. And then from a visual standpoint, his sort of touchstone images that we talked about when we started prep was the idea of the classic blue moonlight in the horror world, and this still image that he had taken from Big of Tom Hanks at the dinner party in his white suit with his long tails, set against these pink curtain shears. And though that was the two ends of our kind of visual spectrum that he was trying to figure out a way to combine. And all of our conversations sort of sprung out of there. So, I mean, to me, and again, like, this is just like in my head, like, I think horror movies are about, and some of your other work, by the way, I watched a Vimeo that you had that was you deconstructing the scene in a movie that you'd shot. That was all about the darkness and, like, just seeing a slight glint in people's eyes and how the work that you went to make it dark. So I think horror movies dark, although, yeah, you're right, especially 80s and 90s horror movies would have that very blue moonlight. And it is a colorful movie because it's a Valentine's Day movie. So, like, there's a lot of color throughout it. And even, like, the bad guy is wearing a mask that has a light in it. So there's that, but, like, I also think of, like, horror movies are about not showing you stuff. Rom-coms are about showing you everything, wide shots, generally high key lighting. So when you're trying to kind of build a strategy to light this movie for that, like, how do you go about, how do you, which parts of which did you say, okay, well, we're not going to do this part of rom-com, or we're not going to do this part of horror, or, we're going to go rom-com in the rom-com scenes, and we're going to go more horror in the slasher scenes. But, like, how do you balance it? I mean, I don't recall us ever having, like, hard and fast rules about, how we were going to sort of present anything, other than we sort of, talked around the idea that like I said, it would start with sort of warmer, peachier, pinker color palettes, move towards the colder stuff, and that we would transition. Our transition point was the interior of Ali's apartment, where Hard Eyes turns up for the first time with the two
Yeah.
lead characters, and then they have a fight, and from that moment on, you're into the more horror world. I mean, they literally run around a corner into the blue moonlight,
Yeah.
and from that point on, you're in horror land until the very last scene. So that was kind of our structure. Obviously the movie shot completely out of sequence. So the first few weeks we were dealing with more of the rom-com world than the horror world.
Hmm.
And then once we got into sort of our swing of 5 or 6 weeks of nights, it was pretty much night work. So at least in our heads, it was kind of fairly consistent. Oh, we were in rom-com world, now we're in horror world. And a lot of it, maybe the bridging thing, or the thing that I latched onto about trying to bridge the gap between the two worlds, was trying to present the horror work in a way that was more, for lack of a better word, lit than maybe some of the work I've done beforehand. I was
Hmm.
quite conscious that we've, myself included, we have all sort of moved in this visual trend of doing dark as like a gloom, or very underexposed, very soft light.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what I wanted to latch onto was more the idea that the light was more clearly defined. It was more lit. It was harder backlights, harder shadows, and it meant I could make the actors look nicer or more romantic, even in the horror stuff. So I really wanted to take care of the cast and present them as movie stars, even for the night work. And I think that's probably what sort of, spans both worlds, in that they look good in the rom-com stuff. They still look good in the night work, but it's just in a different color space, and the lighting's got more atmosphere and more shadow and shape to it.
Before we started recording, we were talking a little bit about Roger Corman, and I was wondering, when I was watching the movie, there's a scene that happens. There's actually a couple of scenes that happen at a drive-in movie theater, and it reminded me a lot of Peter Bogdanowich's Targets. And I was curious if you guys had referenced that at all. I guess maybe it's, I mean, there are other like killer on the loose at a drive-in cinema kind of sequences and scenes that I've seen in movies, but it, especially the way it was filmed or the way that we were getting in and out of people's cars, really reminded me of Targets. I was just curious if that was even a reference point for you guys.
That didn't come up as a reference point, but funnily enough, what did come up as a reference point, what you wouldn't really think of, was Jaws. And we talked about Jaws because of the panic that happens at a certain point in that scene. And we were connecting that to a sequence on the beach in Jaws when everybody freaks out in the water, they get panicked about the shark, and everyone runs in and it goes crazy. We would have kind of slightly abstract conversations about references. They wouldn't necessarily be about the tonal quality of the whole scene. It might be about the energy or the intention of a scene. And so something like Jaws became a reference or a touch point, and we go, okay, yeah. And Josh and I would get what we were talking about. Everyone else would look at us slightly strangely and say,
Really?
Jaws? Really? Yeah.
Well, it makes sense, actually, and I guess that's maybe what I'm even responding to, because in Targets, it's kind of a semi-realistic. It's a shooter at a movie theater or at a drive-in, and so at a certain point, everyone starts rushing out, and I guess that was where it felt the most like it. Although, like when you park a slasher in a in a drive-in, like that was definitely the first reference point that came to mind. It's gorgeously lit though, so. So I guess walk me through sort of you've kind of touched on it a little bit, but let's go into some real detail about like how you look at the script, how you broke it down, what kind of lenses, what kind of lights. Again, I watched this Vimeo, and we can even link it in our show notes of you kind of breaking down how you lit this. It wasn't in Hard Eyes, but how you lit this other movie, and it's. Like you obviously come at it to a great degree from lighting. I used to, when we started the podcast, I would ask DPs if they read a script and saw composition or lighting first. And I haven't really been asking that lately. I eventually kind of gave it up, but it feels like it feels like lighting kind of preceded the composition in this. Am I correct?
Yes, I suppose so. Maybe not intentionally, but I would see things when I read a script for the first time. I try not to see anything. I try not to go into a meeting and be pushing ideas on the director. without hearing their
That's why
take
I
on it
retired that
first.
question, because everyone said the same thing. Like everyone
Okay.
said, I just read it to understand it. But I guess I was trying to get to, like, when you're, maybe I should have changed the question around a little bit to say, like, when you're envisioning how you're going to do it, like, are you thinking in frames or are you thinking in light?
No, I think I'm thinking in light. I think I'm thinking in impressionistically, and I'm thinking more broad strokes, but it's more about light. I think with in terms of composition, or lensing, what I tend to do is as much as possible, I'll try and work with camera operators rather than operate myself. And so, in the famous sort of Roger Deakins podcast question, would you let go of lighting or would you let go of operating? I would let go of operating every time.
Really?
Um, yeah, it's I spent a long time as an operator. I love operating; it's fantastic, and I love framing and composition. It's all great, but I find I'm a more effective DP if I work with a really good camera operator or camera operators in most circumstances because you're using multiple cameras. Um, and what I try and do is give the operators like a framework to work within. So, say in the Hard Eyes case, I knew Josh and I had discussed shooting anamorphic from the very beginning because we're both huge fans of the format. And I particularly like using wider anamorphic lenses and being closer to the casts rather than being on a longer lens further away. So I would give a sort of a brief to the operators to say, look, my preference is, 40 or 50 or 60. I think we're in this kind of world and we're moving in and out rather than lensing up. And I'd rather look towards the windows that way or look towards the streetlights this way and give them something to work within. And then, talk through the shots between the operators and Josh about how we're going to break the scene down. But I don't want to micromanage them. I don't want to sit down and go, listen, it needs to be exactly this. You need to be 6'2" off the ground and you need to track at this moment. I want their input and I want their flavor into the scene. I still get in my head total control over what they're doing because I can wander in and go, hey, for my taste, it should be a little bit more headroom or a little bit lower. But 9 times out of 10, I pick the right operators. They're really good at their job. We had a fantastic team on this. So I feel I can relax in terms of the operating and the compositions, and focus more on the lighting and work with the gaffer and work with the key grip. And it just makes things a little more time efficient. And it means I can spend more time listening to Josh too and sort of thinking ahead, thinking about how the whole scene is going to construct visually.
So when it came down, because with rom-com to me is more about, again, this is just my opinion, so please feel free to correct me in terms of how you guys were looking at it. But like to me, rom-com a lot is about seeing human behavior and seeing awkwardness. You guys have the bloodiest meet cute I've ever seen in a movie. But we have these elements, but it's really just about being with those people. And then the horror stuff, when you get into that, are about kind of intricate sequences that are kind of deeply constructed. Now, how did you and the director go about constructing those sequences? Was it storyboards, previs, shot lists? What was your method?
So Josh is very keen on prepping, the more complicated sequences by using storyboards as a sort of a point of departure or point of discussion. So he'll board something. He'll usually have very specific shots in mind, maybe not for the entire sequence, but for key moments in the sequence he'll have in his head. And then we'll discuss those and we'll sort of build the rest of the sequence around the boards. That conversation then gets revised during prep as locations get confirmed or as cast gets confirmed or scripts change and you're constantly revising the ideas behind those shots. But essentially you're still trying to retain the core key trailer shots, for lack of a better word, that Josh has got in his head. So that kill sequence that's in the trailer of the woman who gets impaled and the camera pulls back through her mouth and reveals her and stuff. That was something Josh very clearly had that idea in his head of, I want to try and be able to travel from behind someone and reveal that she's dead this way. Can we do this?
It's very Sam Raimi.
Yeah, exactly. And he loves Sam Raimi stuff,
I think that there's a shot kind of like that in The Quick and the Dead, the Western that Sam Raimi made, where somebody gets shot through the head and we pull through the hole in their head.
So it's like moments like that, which is kind of the fun stuff, like the really kind of interesting takes on how I'm going to sell this particular story beat. He's thought about and he has an idea of how that's going to cut and how it's going to work together. and then we just try and flesh that out into so it makes the whole scene work around it.
Mm-hmm. And was there like a big reliance on visual effects to pull that stuff off? Because a lot of it looked very practical to me.
We did a huge amount of practical effects. Obviously, visual effects is there. Visual effects helps us out a lot,
Yeah.
but it's a really nice blend. Again, Josh is a savvy guy. He knows when VFX or when physical effects is good and when it's good to use. He knows when it's maybe too slow, and he knows where VFX can help us out. We had a great VFX supervisor on set with us the whole time, who again is the first person to say, "Hey, let's do this practically. This would be better if it's practical." So we were very fortunate in that we had a great crew of people around us who were very much in sync with supporting Josh and how he wanted to make the movie.
And where did you shoot it?
We shot in New Zealand.
That's what I thought. It said that in the credits, but I was like,
Yeah,
it's hard to tell anymore.
It's Auckland doubling for Seattle.
Yeah, yeah. And it's like, I've been to Seattle. I don't know that I don't know where that is. I'm not, I'm not super Seattle guy, but no, you definitely caught the vibe of Seattle. Cause I was like, I was actually going to reach out to a friend of mine who lives in Seattle and say like, hey, did you know that they filmed this? But and then I saw New Zealand and I'm like, probably not. How are the crews out in New Zealand? Did you work primarily with New Zealand crews, or did you bring a lot of people in?
No, I use an entirely local crew. The crew is outstanding. I would take the crew anywhere in the world, and I'm very fortunate. I get to travel for work all over the world. I've worked in the States, worked in London for a long time. Worked in Ireland, worked all over Europe. The crew in New Zealand that I had was amazing. We had a really great time. It was very efficient. It's quite a young crew, and they've done a lot of work in the last sort of 10 years over there. So they've been trained up really well. They've just a great attitude to working too, which helps when you're doing, 6 weeks of night in the rain in the wintertime. And yeah, it was a lot of fun.
That's cool. That's cool. So I guess like when I think of New Zealand filmmaking, I think of Peter Jackson and Lord of the Rings, but those people would all be, in their 60s now.
Yeah.
So it's I'm sure it's a younger crew. And I also think about like we had Elliot Rocket on here talking about making X and Pearl, which I think they shot back to back in New Zealand during the pandemic. Were you guys during the pandemic or were you after?
No, we were after. We shot this last year. This was greenlit last Valentine's Day and rocketed through production to be ready for this year.
Wait, what? So between last year, like right now, and now you
12 months. 12 months. Yeah.
Oh.
I got hired. I'm going to say this week last year.
That's insane.
Or thereabouts.
How much prep? How much prep did you guys have?
We had about 6 or 7 weeks prep and then 6-7 weeks shoot.
Wow.
It was pretty fast. It was very efficient. It was a fantastic production team in New Zealand. It was kind of all seemed like it was all teed up, ready to go. They got the green light, and suddenly it was go, 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 and we hit the ground running, and we were off to the races.
Wow, that is fast. But I guess the script had already been developed, so like you already had a tight script to work with, and you're not making anything up as you go along.
I mean, there was some changes. There's always changes
of course,
to the script in prep, but it was pretty solid.
Oh, and I wanted to ask you about the mask itself, because there are lights integrated into the mask, kind of around the eyes, as the title would imply, in the shape of hearts. Yeah. Is that something like how much input as the cinematographer did you have in the way that worked and how that looked?
A fair amount. I mean, obviously the design of it is what it is. The shape of the hearts. The guys had sort of worked with Tony Gardner to design the mask. My input started to kick in as soon as I landed. The mask was being made in LA and then was going to get shipped to us in New Zealand, maybe 2 weeks thereabouts before we started shooting. So I was really keen to, get it on camera, get it lit, so that we could sort of look at the color and the texture of it, and then figure out the brightness level of the eyes and how that worked. And you learn things. You put it on front of a camera, you start lighting it, you start learning how to light it, you start learning what looks great, what maybe doesn't look so good. You can feed that back then to the makeup effects team, who can make some adjustments to us. So we had a very good makeup effects crew in New Zealand. They could play with the color a little bit for us, and they played with the reflective qualities of the skin, so that the mask sort of felt like skin or a little bit like leather. And what I figured out really quickly was to try and keep moving light on him, because there's kind of a desire to not see him so that he looks threatening. But there's also a lot of voices who want to see him because, it's the hero or he's the bad guy of the movie and they want to see what they pay for. But if you turn all the lights on, it's going to look like a guy in a mask. So you need to figure out a way to, keep it all, interesting looking, but still be descriptive enough that we see enough of them. And for us, my solution was just to try and put him in environments where we could have an excuse for moving light. So whether that's sort of rotating shafts of light in the vineyard, or flashing lights in the police station, or torch lights, or atmosphere when he's outside, anything like that to sort of just to help disguise him a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it makes sense when you say it like that. It's like, yeah, we all know what like Michael Myers or Jason Voorhees looks like, but if you like light up the world, Jason Voorhees just Kane Hodder wearing a hockey mask. It's Kane Hodder is scary. He's an imposing fella, but still,
sure.
That's that's interesting, but it also has its own light, right? Like there's a light in it.
Yeah, and it's so the LED. We had an LED lighting set of eyes, which we could swap out, because we knew, or Josh was very specific. He only wanted the lights to be on for sort of specific beats. He didn't want them wearing the lights or having the lights on the entire time. And the first time when I think we see him do it, it's a very particular moment in the police station, and you cut to his like hard eyes vision, and we played around with. How are we going to shoot that? Were we going to use funky lenses, or were we just going to, do it in post? But he was very clear about only having hard eyes have the lights on for very particular moments.
So for the POV, did you use funky lenses or did you do it in post?
We didn't. We tested a really cool, super funky T1.0 anamorphic portrait lens from Panavision, which made everything other than the crosshairs look like mush, which was amazing. And then we realized that we couldn't use that because obviously the crosshairs would be on the bridge of his nose, and what he would see would be too mushy. So we decided to just do it in post.
It's what post is there for. That's cool. So, outside of, kind of the questions I've hit you with, but like, what are like some of the more challenging, crazy things that, maybe wouldn't occur to me as just a viewer of the movie to ask, like, what were the big challenges of it, or, like your big, your biggest moment of triumph while you were making it?
I would say maybe the general challenge, photographically, was finding that balance between rom-com and horror, and trying to, keep everything looking pretty for the rom-coms, but maybe not too pretty, and then trying to make the slasher still feel like an authentic slasher, but still having everyone look pretty. It's a weird kind of balance, because you kind of don't, the sort of movies that we were talking about in prep that we thought did it really well in the 90s were things like I Know What You Did Last Summer, or Monster Squad from the 80s.
I love that movie. Yeah, Fred Decker.
Yeah, exactly. And we all of those films have a kind of a lovely, nice exterior night aesthetic, where they're lit, but and they still feel like a movie, but you can still see everything. So it was just trying to tread that balance a little carefully. That was tricky. I'm quite used to just leaning into darkness and going, yeah, great, everything's just going to fall off. I've done that in the past, and it can look great, but it wouldn't have been the right approach for this.
I mean, why? Given that you've done kind of the dark stuff, what do you think it was that attracted them to hire you and you to this particular job?
It's a great question. I have no idea. Maybe no one else was available.
Doubtful. Everybody's out of work.
I think everyone's available.
A year ago, everybody was dying for work. Still today.
I think Josh probably looked at my work and saw there was a sort of a consistent embracing of darkness in the work that I do. I'm, quite fond of semi-silhouettes and half-lit faces and things like that. And, I had done horror before, which is not a prerequisite, but it's certainly helpful. I think it's nice for the director to know that the DP is into some of the same movies in the same genre. I think also seeing that I had done something like Atlanta or Mr. and Mrs. Smith, which sort of plays with genre a little bit too, is
I was going to
also
ask,
kind of
yeah.
reassuring, for them. So where you're not necessarily treating everything exactly as it might appear on the tin.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I think Atlanta. This is probably a good time to talk about sort of your background leading up to this. And Atlanta, to me, I think it's a great looking show, and it's a show that creates a bunch of different looks. But before we even talk about Atlanta, let's go like way back. I always want to know what was the moment in your life where you were like, oh, being a cinematographer, that's a job I could have. Like, when did it occur to you that was a job, and how did you go about pursuing it?
Very well, relatively late in life. I didn't, so I have a slightly unusual start. I used to draw and paint a lot when I was a kid and build models. I'm super nerdy and into super geeky stuff. And that led me to art school to study makeup so I could be a makeup effects artist. I
I did
wanted
the
to
same
be the
thing.
next, did you?
I started as a
So
makeup effects artist. Yeah.
I wanted to be the next Robotine or the next Rick
Oh,
Baker or
they're the
something
best.
like that.
They're all the
That's it,
best.
right? They're great.
What was
And
it
it's
like
a
working
really
with Tony
creative
Gardner
job.
then? You're working with Tony Gardner.
We got to have a Zoom or two. That was it. I
Oh,
never met him in real life.
I would
So,
dork
but
out
it
so
was
hard.
exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like Army of Darkness, great.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, so I started off in that slightly unusual non-camera way, and being in art college, we had to learn black and white photography so that we would understand what that was doing to our makeups. And it kind of set me on a path of going, oh, this is interesting. I really like photography. And then I got to go on a few sets. I got to start working quite early, doing prosthetics and model making and a little bit of art department stuff. And I just found the camera was a little more interesting. Um, and sort of in before going to college, before all that, one of the things I was really interested in doing as a kid was drawing comic books. I used to draw my own comic books. At one point, I thought that would be something I could pursue because I knew that was a job. Um, and I realized by my way of thinking that the cinematographer was to the director what a comic book penciler is to a comic book writer, in that they're taking a script. In comic books, you get a script and it's broken down depending on the writer. It might say there's 9 panels or there's 6 panels. Panel six, Captain America does this. And the artist then has to sort of interpret that direction and draw the page. And the cinematographer is sort of doing the same thing with the director. And it kind of made sense to me. So it steered me on a path closer to camera. I started doing less and less effects work. And I eventually went over to London to show my effects portfolio to a few different places. And one of the studios had just finished working on a huge movie called Event Horizon. And
I
the
love that
guys
movie.
who
I
it's an
love that
amazing
movie.
movie,
Yeah,
right?
it's a great movie. Yeah.
It's beautifully shot by Adrian Biddle. And there was a couple of guys in there that took the time to look at my portfolio. And during the conversation, they basically said, oh, if I was going to do this all again, I would go be a DP. I've just finished working with Adrian Biddle. He gets all the time in the world to light the sets. He gets X, Y, and Z, and we get no time at all. And I thought, wow, okay, I was thinking about doing it. Now I'm definitely going to do it. And I walked out the door and literally went, okay, I'm going to pursue this. So then I just went home and started knocking on doors and trying to get work in the camera department as an assistant, and sort of stepped up the ladder that way.
Did you finish the school program or
Yeah. The school program was like 2 years, so I had just graduated and had this portfolio. I did a little bit of work because obviously, trying to knock on doors takes a long time. So there was a studio in Ireland that used to give me a little bit of freelance work as an effects artist, so I could do that for a little while and help pay the bills. And then slowly but surely started getting work as a camera assistant on TV dramas and then commercials and films, and yeah, just went up the ladder the rest of the way.
so you're kind of proving, or at least supporting a theory that I have, which is people who come up through the camera world become really interested in lighting, and people who become DPs by being a gaffer are way more interested in lenses. And I think it's just
Really?
like it's just a pattern I've noticed. The people who didn't like the toys you weren't playing with when you were working your way up.
Right.
So if you came up
Right.
through the camera department, like I would think, oh, I was never really in the camera department, but it's like imagining like, oh yeah, you're thinking when I get to do that, I'll do XYZ. But really you're like, oh, what are those guys over there doing? Like, how do you get that
Yeah.
color purple?
Yeah. It's funny. The camera to me is, you're probably right. The camera to me, I would have been obsessed with obviously 20 years ago. And I probably over corrected when I tried to join the camera department. I was so conscious that it was super technical and it was quite alpha male, in terms of the people, going into it or doing well in it. And so I read every single technical Anaflex ARRI manual I possibly could. And I got really, really technical, really relatively quickly. And then I started working and realized not everyone around me is as super techie as I was at the time. And when I started, lighting, I was shooting short films and music videos when I was still assisting. I would be very, very technical in my approach, both to lighting and to camera. And I'd micromanage everybody, and I would be too, I'd be too hands-on. I was too afraid to let go and to take in other people's ideas and stuff.
Yeah.
And it's only with a bit of time that I was able to let go of that and sort of consciously go, okay, I don't need to absorb every single page of the American Cinematographer Manual. I can reference it if I need to.
Yeah, at some point. Well, I mean, like, so would you say that today that being highly technical and understanding the technical stuff you're working with is still a part of your kind of your regimen as a cinematographer, something that you're thinking about a lot, or have you taken your hands off of that particular wheel and are more concentrated on the aesthetics of what you're doing?
Probably more the latter. I think what I do is I sort of had a little bit of an epiphany a couple of years ago, 6, 7 years ago, that the giant collection of American Cinematographer magazines that I had in my house that I used to read religiously, I no longer needed to sort of read religiously every time I started a job. And I kind of decided to get rid of them all and distill them down to the half a dozen keystone issues that unlocked something in my learning along the way. And that's my little.
What are some of those?
I mean, I've got them.
I just want to hear, like, what are the ones? What are a couple of the ones that like really spark something for you?
So Seven, Fight Club. There was an article that Janusz Kaminski and Mauro Fiore did about the movie that they directed, DP'd, the horror movie that I've forgotten the title of, which was a really great article. It'll come, Lost Souls.
Oh yeah.
And there was a couple of others. There's a Harris Savides one of the game, and something that Bob Richardson did. Again, I can't remember. I'm going to say Snow Falling on Cedars or something like that. Bringing Out the Dead, maybe. So I have this little stack of 5 or 6 of them. And
that's
I'm like,
smart. That's really smart because I have my giant, massive AC collection as well, and it just kind of takes up space.
That's it. And they're all digital, so you can get them all. But what I was doing was I was sort of, every time I'd start a job, I would be like, okay, I'm going to research the shit out of anamorphic lenses or whatever, and I would spend too much time thinking about the technical and not enough time thinking about being in the present and thinking about the actual story of the project that I was telling. So it took a sort of a conscious effort for me to just go, okay, I know all the technical stuff, or I know most of it. It's sitting in the back of my brain. I'm just going to let go of that now and try and be more present, and listen. I have this thing about listening. I say this all the time. I think this one of the most important skills a DP can have is actually learning to listen, like really listen to what a director is trying to say or a producer is trying to say, because they're not always as articulate as you are visually, or they're not articulate in the same way that you are. And sometimes they're trying to scratch at an idea that maybe you're not hearing properly. So for me, it was, I've started letting go of all that stuff, or a long time ago, letting go of the technical as much as I possibly can. I still keep up on everything. If it's a new camera out, I'll read about it. If there's a new light out, I'll read about it. I just won't obsess the way I used to.
No, that all makes sense, and I feel like that's kind of it's weird that I feel like firstly the mastery of the stuff makes it so that you can take you don't have to be like constantly pouring in that stuff, but also I can't tell you how many times I've talked to somebody on here who's like, yeah, I'm not that technical. What lens did you use for that scene? I don't really remember. I let the AC pick it, and it's like sometimes shocking when like masters, people who I consider to be like absolute masters of this stuff are more just kind of looking for the image that it's just like being the director in so many ways. You're just looking for the image the way you want to see it. And, you have technical things at your disposal, but also you have a lot of great creative people at your disposal.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also the management side of things, which is a huge part of the job that we don't always talk about. But if I, like I was saying with the operators, if I am constantly saying to the operator, no, it has to be the 50 mil, it has to be the 50 or the 40 or whatever. And they're going, you know what, it would be if we just went one lens wider or one lens longer, it would make this shot so much better. If I'm not listening to that or listening out for that, I'm not getting the best out of them, and they're not having any fun. So then they're not going to continue to give me the best or try to give me their best. Same with a gaffer. If I start telling the gaffer how to rig every light or exactly, I kind of don't care anymore. I'm like, I need the soft light here. I need it to be this direction. I need this much intensity from it. Maybe I need, put it up. Oh, maybe soften it a bit more. That's it. And let's shape it here. I don't need to, you know, overcorrect them. They're all really good. They're all really good at doing their jobs. What I need to do is listen, give them a framework. So I need this, and then cherry pick the good ideas, and that's it.
No, that's really great. It's good to hear that too. Like, if for people who are starting out, like, what I don't even know how to ask this question, but like, how do you recommend people kind of, because I feel like it's something you have to teach yourself to do, to listen and be in a conversation. Like, how would you recommend people who are like all up in their own heads and aren't doing that, how to break out of it?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. I think it takes time. I think everything about this career takes time, or certainly for me, my experience and in the what I can see in my colleagues, it's all, takes time. I don't think there's anything that you do that you suddenly break out overnight success. Not for most people anyway. So I think leaning into the idea that it is a journey and that you're constantly learning and constantly evolving is a good thing. Um, I think maybe just letting go of the tech at some point, even as an experiment, just let go of the tech. We're so bombarded right now with, incredible cameras, lenses, lights. There's new stuff every week or two. We're getting, new lights, new lenses, new filters, new everything. And by and large, it all sort of does the same thing.
Yeah.
It's, and the tech as well, you need to wrap your head around the idea that unless you're doing June, I don't necessarily, even on the jobs I'm doing, get to have 200 of the latest Vortex space lights or whatever, because maybe there's no 200 space lights available. So you on every level of production, you're always sort of making do with slightly different tech. Maybe it's not the latest thing from you see in the magazines, but basically it's all light or it's all cameras or it's all lenses. They
Yeah.
kind of all do the same thing. They just, some of them let you function on set in a slightly different way. So I think if you let go of, being obsessed with, I have to shoot everything on whatever brand of lens or brand of camera, that's only a good thing.
No, that's really good. So before we go, I definitely wanted to touch on both Atlanta and Mr. and Mrs. Smith, both of which you shot. Well, firstly, just kind of take me through like what brought you to Atlanta, and because like that show really kind of goes into a lot of different looks and feels, and almost to the point of being several different shows. Like what brought you to that, and how did you approach like that specific challenge?
So Atlanta came my way because season three was going to travel the characters to Europe for most of the season, and they were going to shoot it at a certain point. And Christian Sprenger, who's the DP who shot season 1 and 2 and season 4, he was signed up to do season 3, and COVID happened, and it delayed the shoot, and it pushed the shoot by, I think it was a year. And by the time they came back around to the production, Christian, his wife was expecting a baby, so he couldn't travel. He couldn't leave the US to go to Europe. So they were looking for someone to take over and shoot the 6 European episodes, and Christian would do the 4 standalone episodes. So that season that we're going to shoot in the US. So again, it was a case of them reaching out to my agent and seeing who was around, and my reel got put in front of Hiro Murai, and I had a chat with Hiro. We got on very well, and yeah, then the next day I was jumping on a plane to go to London and start prepping.
Nice. And did that lead directly to Mr. and Mrs. Smith?
Yeah. So then the overlap with Mr. and Mrs. Smith is all it's Hiro and Christian and Donald Glover. Donald is he's a very nice guy. He's a very smart guy, and he surrounds himself with a group of supportive, like-minded filmmakers. and they're very loyal to a lot of the people that they've worked with over the years. And again, Mr. and Mrs. Smith was originally, the schedule was slightly, was planned to be something slightly different. They were going to shoot a certain amount of episodes in Europe, and Christian was going to do the US ones, and they asked if I'd do the European ones. Then the schedule changed and shifted a little bit. And so I ended up going to New York and doing a couple of episodes in New York. And then Christian and I split the episodes in Italy.
Now, when you're splitting stuff like that, are you guys in contact? Are you sharing notes about what's working best, or what lenses you're using, what lights you're using to like make so that the show feels like one of a piece?
Yes and no. There's, again, a bit like with the tech, there is a danger that you can over prescribe to someone and then you end up sort of getting a poor copy.
Yeah.
So what Christian would do for Mr. and Mrs. Smith, I was prepping my episodes when he was shooting his first episodes, and so Hero and Christian shared the reference material that he and Hero were talking about together with Amy Simons, who's my director, and me, and so we were sort of tuned into the conversations that they had had in prep about what they were going for, but we were also given the remit to make it our own and not to try and ape what they were doing. There was no, some TV shows, you are very much following a formula, that's been set up, and the showrunner wants it to be X, Y, and Z. But not with Mr. and Mrs. Smith or with Atlanta. We were given, very open briefs. It had to feel the same, but it had to feel the same in our way.
Yeah.
So we would do, one of our episodes in New York was, the common reference for Mr. and Mrs. Smith was that it was a 70s styled thriller. All the references were 70s movies that they were looking at, particularly 70s New York movies, So I was talking to Amy about Friends of Eddie Coyle and, the Warriors and,
Ooh.
Stuff like that. So they weren't exactly the same references that Hero and Christian were using, but they were, sibling references, if that makes sense.
So before we go, do you have a website or Instagram or anything where like if anyone has a question or people can see more of your work?
I am on the gram. I am Stephen Murphy BSC on Instagram, Stephen with a PH, and my website is stephen-murphy.com.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's great to meet you. Amazing work with Hard Eyes. I hope more people see it. It's doing pretty well though, right? Like I think it's
yeah, it's doing pretty good. It had a good second weekend, so which is great. Listen, thanks for having me. It's been great.
All right, so that was Stephen Murphy. Stephen, hey, thank you so much for being on the show. It was great having you.
It's always crazy to me when we get a DP on who listens to the show. And Stephen was a fan of the show, and that's like I don't know. It's like when we admire their work and want to have them on here, and then they've actually heard the show. It blows my mind every time. So
yeah. So Ben, it is bill paying time. We have to thank our fine friends over at Aperture, maker of all kinds of cool lighting products for the industry. One of the products I would like to highlight is called the Infinibar PB6 4-light kit. Just rolls off the tongue. The Infinibar PB6 4-light kit is 4 of their
before I work out, I like to eat an Infinibar.
Yes, and an Infinibar, it goes down. Yummy! You've got all the energy you need. So the Infinibar, they're various lengths of these pixel bars. They're essentially like tube lights, but they're flat. They're really cool, and I want to draw attention to this one because tube lights have gone a little bit out of fashion. I think they just got so hot for a moment and that everyone was using them. And the Infinibars, I think a lot of people haven't really played around with, but this 4-light kit has 4 2-foot, 60 centimeter, 14-watt RGB WW. That's this word salad here is basically saying they're full color, 2-foot long LED lights, and that you can link them together. There's a bunch of different sort of cool formations you can do with various accessories, but it comes in a relatively small Pelican case type or Pelican style case with a lot of accessories, and it's about $2,500. And you might think $2,500 sounds like a lot when you're looking at like LED tube lights, because there's a bunch of cheap crap out there, frankly, on Amazon, but they are not professional tools with this sort of integration, with all the capabilities that this has. The PB6 is a very compact case with a lot of cool stuff, and it's got a multi-layer foam. So you've got like your bars on the top, your accessories on the bottom, your individual power. One kit like this would allow you to light various types of scenes and use those lights in all kinds of different ways, either linked or unlinked, backlights, key lights, fill lights, plus pixelability if you need to animate the lights, create fire effects and things like that. Anyway, $2,600 is about what the kit costs. It's available, of course, over at Hot Rod Cameras. And if you have questions or would like to see an Infinibar, we have them all the time in our showroom. And man, I can't get enough of them. They draw a lot of attention, and it's because they're frankly really cool. They are also DMX capable, Sidus Link capable, all the good stuff that you would expect. And inside such a small little kit, you can do a ton of stuff with it. So check them out at Hot Rod Cameras and check out the Aperture Infinibar PB6 4-light kit.
And now, short ends.
Excellent.
All right. So, Ben, it is our time of the show where we talk about our pet obsessions. It's called our short ends. What is your pet obsession this week?
Well, it was actually somebody who was a guest on our show about a year ago. I heard a new interview with him. So it's Scott Ross, the founder of Digital Domain, who we had on roughly about a year ago. It was May of 2024. And he is on the VFX show, which the VFX show is actually one of the podcasts that made me want to make a podcast with Mike Seymour. And Mike Seymour is a visual effects guy, as the VFX show title might imply. And he really goes into some deep stuff about the current state of the VFX world with Scott Ross, who is, extremely articulate and I won't say doomsaying, but like I take him more seriously than a lot of other people when he talks about the perils of AI and what AI is going to do. And he's afraid of it kind of gutting the VFX industry, which to a degree I'm not surprised. And Mike Seymour, who's someone who like he runs FX PhD, which is like an online school for learning how to do visual effects. And he's done VFX professionally for years. They they talk a lot about how the minority of the people in the VFX world are the artists, and a lot of them are like technicians who are putting the hubcaps on the cyber cars or whatever in the movies, or writing code, and how AI is gutting that stuff. And Scott Ross doesn't run Digital Domain anymore, but I feel like he's we had him on the show. He's freaking smart. He knows his stuff, and he's a pioneer in this stuff, and he saw it come up. And I think it's worth hearing this interview that Mike Seymour does, just to kind of hear where Scott's head is at. Also, we kind of teased it when we had him on the show. I don't think his book was out yet, but his book is out. So I haven't read it yet, but I'm thinking about picking it up. Because when we were talking to him, I think he was still working on it. But it's sort of like is the history of Digital Domain, but also he was the manager over at ILM for some time as well. Like he's made a career out of this stuff and out of running it. And he even talks a bit about a movie that he tried to get made that he couldn't get made through when he was still at Digital Domain. And it was kind of a sad story because it sounded like a pretty cool movie. But anyway, it's the VFX show. It just dropped about a week ago. And it's a great podcast anyway. They used to put out a lot more episodes than they do now. And I feel like my visual effects education started with listening to their podcast, then eventually went to Andrew Kramer and Video Copilot, and currently is with the Corridor Digital people, who are always dissecting and showing how to do various things with visual effects. But the VFX show is a really good show, and Mike Seymour is a great interviewer, and he really knows his stuff. So check it out.
It sounds awesome. I'll totally check it out.
All right. And Ilya, what is your pet obsession of the week?
Well, it's something I just discovered recently, and I sent it to you so you would know a little bit about it when it came time to talk. It's called Cyber Gaffer. Did you happen to watch that link I sent you for Cyber Gaffer?
I did. That was cool.
So Cybergaffer, I think, is kind of a goofy name, but what it does is got some promise, and I think it's kind of interesting.
It's
How
more
well
like cyber lighting designer. It's not really cyber gaffer, because like cyber gaffer to me says we're going to send you a robot that's going to put lights on stands and aim them and focus them. Anyway,
So there's a company called Anti-Latency, and they're based in Cyprus. And I wasn't familiar with this
is
company.
there an uncle latency? Wow.
I think the idea is like it's anti, as in like,
No, I get
yes,
it. I'm just making a
you
cheap
got
joke.
it. But
Yeah.
I appreciate the cheap joke.
All right.
So, but here's the thing. For those of you who are listening to us and cannot see any visuals right now, no worries. I can explain it all really simply so that you get it. You've seen a virtual stage, you've seen sort of like the virtual sets of like The Mandalorian, and quite often what happens in a lot of those LED wall sets is that they end up using lights from actually the wall to simulate light on the subjects of the humans or the people who are in front of it. Well, if you're doing a blue screen or a green screen, you can't actually use LED walls to light your subject. You have to augment with other lights. And so CyberGaffer, the people at Anti-Latency, they've come up with a system so what you're putting in front of your blue screen or green screen, it has some sort of reference to a bunch of lights that you have rigged up already that are RGB lights. And as you change your background, your lights up above or wherever you place them automatically adjust so that you get a match between your talent in the foreground and what your virtual background is. Now, I haven't seen it in person. I don't know actually how effective it is. Looking at their demo, looks pretty good. It looks
Yeah.
it's
It's like they change the quality of a light coming through the window, or they change the angle of it, and then it reflects on the actors.
and I don't think it actually is a like, look, everyone's going to do something different. And having seen sort of like they're behind the scenes, it looks like they got 16 lights all up above. And it looks to me in the video that some of the light is supposed to be coming like from the side. And yes, it kind of gives that effect. But I feel like to do this appropriately, it'd be like the hollow deck. You'd have to have like lights in almost every single direction in order to really create something convincing. So what they
Yep.
have done, though, is create sort of like, I feel like a really good first pass. Like they've created like, oh, okay, so you want to just have it not be completely out of place. It can automatically make an adjustment. And they do list what this will cost you, what this will run you if you want to buy it. And it's a license, it says, for $25,000. It is not exactly now granted.
Well, yeah, you're even to need this, you're someone who owns a soundstage.
But beyond that, it's a license for $25,000. You don't own it. That's per year. It's a $25,000 per year.
Okay.
So at the moment, I believe there's probably other people who will do this. And I think that there's probably I don't understand the methodology that they're using, but I feel like there is some way to be analyzing scene, color, texture, understanding where your subject is. And
I'm going to bring this down to a very basic consumer grade level.
Yeah, please.
But I have LED lights in my house that are RGB.
Mm-hmm.
And you can set it. There's a way to set it so that like if you're watching a movie or something, it will light your house to look like you're in the movie. So if it's like a blue scene, it'll all shift blue. If it's a red scene, it'll all shift red. And it's the Philips Hue system is the one that I have. And there's a way to do it. And that's been out for like 5 years, at least, maybe more. So like that's the super consumer version of it. And like what it's doing in essence is it's looking at, if you're using Unreal Engine for your backdrop or whatever, it's analyzing the color and emulating that with lights, and it's creating like a slight interactive light thing. Now I had not looked at the price point, and I do think if you're running a multi-million-dollar soundstage per year, a $25,000 per year licensing fee
might be nothing. Yeah,
it's not the end of the world.
Big deal. Yeah.
But I also think that it's not such an original idea that somebody else couldn't figure out how to do it for a fraction of the cost, or for a one-time payment of $25,000.
Look, I think that it's interesting. I think that it is something we're probably going to see again from somewhere else, probably implemented differently. And I have a feeling that it might just be the first sort of product out there like that, but it probably won't be the last. And now that it's sort of like in the zeitgeist, it would not surprise me if someone else comes up with a very affordable way to do this, because I really believe that sort of and we'll certainly probably after NAB this year talk to more people who are using it, but sort of the Lightcraft Pro sort of home studio, YouTube's virtual stage creator now is going to be a thing. And as that becomes more and more of a thing, these tools will become more relevant, and that someone, maybe a Lightcraft or someone else, will be producing things that give more of a similar sort of effect. So it's interesting to see it. I was unfamiliar with this company. I didn't know anything about it. I'm sure in the virtual space they're probably well known, but as I'm more in the production space, this hadn't come across my radar before. But I think it's very interesting, and I think it's more of a harbinger of things to come. And I don't think it is the be all end all probably for most people. And I gotta say that anyone who is actually like a lighting designer, a lighting person, any automatic lighting, anything, it's better be really, really good. Better
well,
be
I mean, I think
insanely good.
If you're like, let's say you're one of those millions of companies that I keep seeing that are making vertical, basically soap operas, and you have to shoot, 40 pages a day or whatever it is that they're doing.
Yeah, then this might be the thing. Yeah, for
like,
sure.
This will save you a lot of time, and you weren't that concerned about dialing in the lighting per scene, and I feel like, if you're even doing virtual production Mandalorian style, well, then you have the LED wall.
All right, Ben, I think that just about does it for this episode. Where can people find you if they want to track you down?
Track me down at benrock.com. That's got my current reel, which probably needs updating, and info about me and links to a bunch of my stuff. I was looking at it recently. I'm like, I need to simplify this website. There's too many links. But anyway, that's where you can find me. How about yourself, Ilya? Where can people find you?
You can find me over at Hot Rod Cameras, hotrodcameras.com, currently in Los Angeles, back in Portland next week, and then going to be out at NAB. So if you are thinking about going to NAB in April, we're going to do a live version of this podcast out there at NAB, which is pretty exciting. So we're
are we allowed to say yet who it'll be, or are we keeping that under our hat?
No one has told me not to, but why don't we wait till next week? Why don't we wait till our episode next week, and then we'll spill all the beans about this?
Okay, cool. Keep it under our hat. Let's just say it's pretty awesome.
It's pretty awesome. And it sounds like two. It sounds like two interviews. So,
yeah,
it'd be great. All right, so Ben, who do we have to thank? Who made this show possible?
As always, we have to thank our intrepid, amazing producer, Alana Cody, who is kicking all the ass and getting us all these kick-ass interviews. That's kick-ass twice. I said kick-ass 2 times.
Say kick-ass a couple more times.
Kick-ass. Maybe that'll get us flagged. Remember when you couldn't say kick-ass on television? Anyway, so Alana Cody, thank you so much. We got to thank Charlie Nix, our still kind of new editor. Welcome to the team, Charlie. Great to have you. And last but not least, we got to thank Kay Zalatrakshy, who composed all the music that you heard on this episode. Check his stuff out at musicbykays.com. Also, the guy who suggested, not that we make it a topic of the podcast, but who brought to my attention the whole Technicolor fiasco. I think it's fair to call it a fiasco.
Yeah, well, we'll certainly see. It certainly sounds like it right now. Yeah.
I hope they pull it out. Anyway, Ilya, you want to take us out?
Thanks for tuning in.
This has been the Cinematography Podcast, presented by Hot Rod Cameras. Find your next camera, lens, or accessory on the web at hotrodcameras.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our show on iTunes and connect with us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for listening.